Welcome, everybody, to the Hoops Rehab Show, football edition, Sunday night. Woo! Eric,
What was that?
Game. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you? Didn't think
Well,
I'd end my evening with a draw.
As
like
a Packers fan,
like it's soccer, but yeah.
As a Packers fan, we got a lot to get into.
Oh, must feel like a semi feel like a loss, but it's not at the end of the day. But must feel like it a little bit.
Very, very much so. All right. As always, everybody, I am the Game Injury Doc, aka Dr. Evan Jeffries. On my right is Eric B. Mack. We are the host of the Hoops Rehab Show. This is the football edition. You can find us at our YouTube page, the Hoops Rehab Show. Please hit that subscribe button if you are watching live right now. And then we also have the Instagram page, the Hoops Rehab Show. You can find us at our handles on all social media platforms at the Gameinjurydoc and at Eric B. Mack. Tomorrow, we'll have the pod uploaded. So if you're not watching this live, you can watch the pod version or listen to the pod version wherever you get your podcast. That is the Hoops Rehab Show. Please follow the pod because we get notifications for every episode that comes out. Please rate and comment on there. That would definitely help the cause for a show getting out there, especially doing football and basketball. All right, Eric, are you ready to get it cracking?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
All right, so let's just jump right into Sunday night football. As you guys know, I am a Packers fan. I'm from LA, but I rep Green Bay all day. And this game from the jump just had a lot of energy. Obviously, Micah Parsons coming back to Dallas and the Packers kind of feeling good about their team. This was crazy. I mean, I don't think this was the highest scoring tie game ever in the NFL. Right, Eric?
Yeah, man. It was I had to look back. I was thinking, I don't remember a tie game the last couple of years. And so the last one was this thing I saw December of 2022, I think it was. The Commanders and the Giants tied 20-20. And so this is double that, 40-40. I think in a surprise. I mean, I didn't really expect an offensive shootout, at least from the Dallas perspective. I mean, people have been scoring on Dallas all season long, so definitely expected Green Bay to probably put up some points. But any given Sunday, you're on the road. When you have like a big road favorite, it always kind of makes you a little squeamish because it's just something about home cooking that is that equalizer. And so Dallas showed out. You know, I think when you have a tie game, I think it probably feels like in Green Bay's side that they maybe lost it, and then Dallas's side it maybe feels like they won it. You know, this is just being someone that's really not, a big fan of either. But what I am not a fan of is tie games in general. That's for sure. And I don't even think about it much, right? Because you don't have a lot of them. So I guess it's like you don't want to go crazy over something that doesn't happen that often. But come on, how is a game going to end in a tie? And it just goes to show every time it does happen, we got to do something about this.
Yeah. Before I make my point, if you are on the live on Twitter or YouTube, please hit that comment section. Let us know how you're feeling about this game or any game that happened. And we'll kind of get to that throughout the show. But my first point is you changed the rules for overtime. Obviously, they've changed it for the playoffs. And now they have changed it for the regular season where both teams get a possession no matter what. Eric, both teams got a possession today. 10 minutes went by and the game was over. And it ended in a tie. How can you not go to some sort of sudden death afterwards to avoid a tie in the NFL? This is not soccer, y'all. This is the NFL, American football. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I think the reason why it's been like in the last couple of years more so in the playoffs, because as we know, it's not going to end in the tie in the playoffs. And so you can have this structure. In the regular season, it's a bit interesting because there was a time when the overtime was just as long as each period, 15 minutes, and now it's to 10. And I'm surprised with it being 10 minutes that we don't see more ties. And with this new rule change, I think we may see a little bit more, just because, of course, it had to be just perfect today, but there's a great chance that there's only going to be about 2 possessions. When you look at a quarter of football, there's usually only 2 or 3 possessions each quarter, right? And so you shrink that by a third. I think it's just probably first of, I don't know, of many, but I think there's more opportunity for it to be there to be ties. And so while I do like that it's not complete sudden death, or it's like, hey, you win that toss, how it used to always be, you win the toss, you just go and you kick a field goal and you win it, and you don't even get a chance, to kind of redeem himself. That I like. But yeah, I think when a game ends in a tie, it's like, come on, you gotta, I don't know, maybe like some kind of like each team, starts kind of college style, right? Start at the 5 or the 10, and you get like a crack at it each, something. I know player safety is a part of it too, but it just seems weird to have a football game ending in a tie.
Yeah, just whenever you see a tie on the record, it always changes the playoff implications. Everything just makes it like
tiebreakers, not everything anymore.
Yeah, it just changes the whole dynamics. And so, like, giving them a sudden death or next score wins, would that really change any difference there? It would not change anything. It would just make the game a little bit longer. But in a game like this, it's so important to have a win versus a loss.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. You start thinking about it down the line. It's like something about the tiebreaker. Say if like Lions and Packers tied, you'd have to like look at all the tiebreakers, and then now there probably won't be one because, of course, unless the Lions have a tie themselves. But yeah, it's like one of these things. If it happens again, you probably start thinking about it. But you don't realize things are flawed a lot of the times with these like leagues until something happens, and then you're like, wait a second, that's not going to work. And so it'll be, something that's, I'm sure, talked about tomorrow. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll hear it on First Take. Well, they should never be in the game with a tie, right? We'll probably hear that from somebody.
Yep.
But when you look at the game overall and the quarterback play out of this game from Dak and from Jordan Love, to me, and like I said before, kind of going into the season, I felt like the Dallas's offense was going to be there, and there had to be a little bit more respect put on Dak's name because he is a great quarterback. I think he gets a lot of slack for the contract stuff going on, like people not really thinking he's elite, but overall he's a hell of a quarterback, and to do that without CeeDee Lamb today was remarkable, especially against a Packers defense that have been probably top 5 in the league this year.
Oh yeah, I mean, but they both, just looking at their numbers, very, very similar numbers. So Jordan Love 337 and 3 touchdowns. Dak Prescott, 319 and 3 touchdowns. So no interceptions for each. I think Love may have had a fumble loss, but it was definitely an offensive showing. I think Dallas showed that it's not all about CeeDee Lamb. I know that had to have been a big concern, with reason, of course, with him being out. But Green Bay's defense has been pretty stout all year long. And so that does show that they do have some explosiveness, on the Dallas side. And then Green Bay coming off that dud last week against Cleveland, offensively, speaking, they looked a lot better. If they would have lost today, it would have been like, man, that 2-0 start where they were looking super crisp. They beat the Commanders, they beat the Lions. To go then 2-2 would be like, all right, well, just going to be another long season. And so being 2-1-1 does sound a little better than 2-2. But hey, yeah, I think both offenses showed out, and we'll see how the rest of the year goes for each club.
Yeah, I mean, great game, obviously, offensively. I think Dallas, his defense has got an issue. Obviously, they've given a bunch of points against Philly, given a bunch of points against the Giants. Obviously, what happened tonight. So they got some issues going there. I think for the Packers, Normally, I don't think there's much of an issue as far as their defense, but they did have some trouble in the secondary today. Obviously, stopping Pickens and stopping everybody else on the Cowboys was an issue. So we'll have to look at the drawing board, go back to videotape, and just kind of realize that they probably got to play a little bit better at the cornerback position and safety position there.
Yeah, that was I don't want to say exposed, but that was the kind of the weak link today, and so they'll go back to the drawing board. Which, if you were to look, they got obviously Cincinnati next week. Green Bay actually has a bye. Early bye. Jeez, pretty early in the season. First round of buys. And then they got Cincy, which that Cincy matchup looks a little different than it would have looked early in the year, and that would have been a big test if Burrow was there. For that secondary. And so, long season ahead. Just kind of want to take a look at what Dallas has next. Okay, so Dallas, it's in a decent spot against the Jets and then the Panthers the next 2 weeks. So they kind of want to. Yeah. Okay. Hey, but they won 30-0 last week, so they must be decent, right?
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm sorry. That was my most sleeper pick, but that looks like it's gone wrong.
Yeah, so Packers. Hey, I mean Packers. Giants. Giants talk about a little bit later, but Cowboys. Yeah, so if they can get a couple wins against some bottom feeders, maybe their season will turn around after all.
Yeah, I think if you looked at overall, who is that tie better for? It's going to be Dallas for sure. Because if they lost that game and go 1-3, it's probably going to be a lot more difficult for them to try to make that playoff push, or at least that wild card position at 1-3 versus 1-2-1, right? So I think it was a benefit for them to at least get the tie out of there instead of losing the game. But Jordan Love came close to not even getting a chance.
Oh, you didn't talk about that. That's right. That was a risk.
I don't know what kind of management that was, but with 18 to 19 seconds, knowing you don't have a timeout, not either hurrying up to the line faster or just spiking the ball and just settling for the field goal. I understand that you want one play to kind of see if you can score, but you got to get that moving a little faster.
Yeah, they're definitely playing with fire, because if he just 1 second late, we would have been talking about like all night. What was Green Bay thinking? You got to just be smart, play for the tie. And so obviously they were playing for the win there, but in terms of like time management, they got to kind of clean that up, because that almost was disastrous.
100%. All right, Eric, let's get into some other games. Quickly, though, I'm going to play a little game with you. Okay. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
The Chiefs. The mother effing Chiefs, okay? They are back, and they
very much disrespected for a little while there.
But whooping on those Ravens, okay? They are now 2-2. This was the big matchup of two 1-2 teams, knowing that one of those teams were going to be a 1-3 team. Eric, what were your first thoughts of that game and how it unfolded?
Man, the thing about the Ravens. So if we take it back to fourth quarter of week 1 with 4 or 5 minutes left, up like 15 or whatever it was, like how the season has changed. Still early, and then we're going to talk about an injury, which could really make it tough. But we're talking about just the last few minutes of that game that have just made the difference of a kind of beginning of the year disaster versus having a good start. And so, we knew going into it, one of these teams was going to be 1-3, and not overly surprised that the Chiefs won, right? They're at home. They're always been tough in Arrowhead. Not a huge surprise, but just the way it went down is what I'm surprised at. Chiefs have not really been whooping up on anybody the last couple of years, let's be honest. And so them doing that, it really shows, at least early on, that they are back, or they maybe never left, and they're going to be a team to be reckoned with when it's all said and done. And Baltimore, it's just, as long as Lamar is healthy and he comes back fine. I mean, I still like them. They're gonna piece together some wins. I think they've had years. I think they started off 0-2 last year, right? If I'm recall, give me 1 second.
Yeah, I believe they were 0-2 last year.
Yeah, 0-2, 0-2, 1-3. I mean, similar starts. Yeah, they were 0-2, and then they rattled off 5 straight. So it's not doomsday. Again, doomsday, not doomsday considering if Lamar is healthy, of course. But yeah, it's definitely a tough stretch for a team that is really one of the favorites to win it all, or at least make it to the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Ravens are not your 2001 Ravens when you just know their defense is so elite. Eric, I'm going to give you a little stat here. In their 3 losses, they have given up 41, 38, and 37 points. Is that a Ravens defense to you?
No,
I mean, you can't.
It really isn't.
You can't win games giving up that many points, right? So obviously they have a defensive issue. We're going to get into Lamar's injury later on in a couple segments from now, but regardless of the Lamar injury, before he even went out, they were struggling and they were having an issue and they were down by a lot. So I think even if Lamar was healthy for this full game, they're more than likely not winning this game either. So they got to go do some deep soul searching and figure out if this defense can be fixed. Otherwise, my Super Bowl pick will be out of this year's playoffs.
Wow. That would be something. That would be definitely a disappointing year if they don't sniff the playoffs. And so coming into the year, it was actually projected for them to have a better defense than they had last year. And so you never know. Maybe they will. Maybe it's a long season, as I've alluded to a couple times already tonight. There are things you can do, like having Houston come to town next week, Texans. That's a nice cure for any defense. And so it just takes kind of one game a lot of times to get things going. But if they don't turn it around, I mean, that offense is explosive and they'll put up points on anybody. But as you can see, it's one of these things where it's really hard to just do it week in and week out. You got to have your defense come to the party, and we'll see. We'll see if that's something that turns around or if it's just one of those bad years. And if it is a bad year for Baltimore, hell of a coach. He's done amazing things. I think a seat might start getting kind of hot, if you catch my drift. Ooh.
Wow.
Kind of warm.
Wow. That is a extremely hot take. But I will say one thing, though. Looking at their schedule, obviously the 3 of the first 4 games, they had Buffalo, Detroit, and Kansas City. So those are obviously 3 of the best teams in the NFL.
Absolutely.
Going forward, like you said, they have Houston next week, so that should help. They do have the Rams the following week, but then they get a huge bye. So depending on kind of this Lamar injury, this could be huge for them in that aspect. After that, you got Chicago, you got Miami, you got Minnesota, you got Cleveland, you got the Jets, you got Cincinnati, and then you finally play Pittsburgh. So I think there are some scenarios here, if they can get healthy, kind of get this defensive strategy fixed, they can roll off some victories there, about 4 or 5 in a row there, kind of get things rolling to a matchup with Pittsburgh in that, what week is it? That would be week 14, actually. So it seems like if they can just get, say next week, they get a win.
1-1 the next 2.
Yeah, 1-1. The Rams will probably be more difficult depending on Lamar Jackson's situation. But going after that bye, they have like basically 5 games where they should have a winnable game there. So I think looking at their schedule, they have a better schedule than, say, the Chiefs had if they were to go 1-3. So I think if either team went 1-3, Baltimore probably had the best case scenario as far as schedule.
Yeah, definitely. I know we're going to talk a little later about Lamar Jackson's injury, but yeah, depending on, let's say if he, for whatever, misses a couple of games and they have the bye, let's say they go 1-1, they're 2-4. Then they got 4 to 5 winnable games. You win those, and you're looking at 6-4, 7-4, and they're kind of just right back in the mix of things. So that's obviously a perfect world, but it is something that a team like Baltimore can and most likely will do.
Yeah, that's for sure. And going to the Chiefs side, Patrick Mahomes threw for 4 touchdowns. Right, he hasn't done that in a long time. I think I heard 2 years or 3 years he hasn't thrown for. I could be mistaken. I'll have to kind of look that back up by the end of the show. But I remember hearing that it's been quite some time since he's thrown 4 touchdowns. Now, what do you feel? Like, what is your gut feeling with the Chiefs? Are they back, or is it just the same old script that they're always going to play? They're always going to be there no matter what.
I mean, I don't know if they've ever went anywhere. I mean, they're super talented. They got like the best quarterback. They got a really good defense. I mean, they run the ball. They've definitely changed the DNA of their team. I think when Rashee Rice comes back after the 6-week absence, I think that's gonna even just give him more of a boost, because he was tremendous. I think that's one of the reasons why Kansas City last year was not. I mean, they were winning games, of course. I don't want to say they weren't amazing, because it's all about winning, but they weren't putting on a show like we were accustomed to. So with him coming back, I was just kind of looking at their schedule. At Jacksonville, Detroit, Vegas, Washington, Buffalo, Denver, Colts. They got some tough games. And so I think they'll be like just kind of similar to last year, where they're going to just have close games and probably pull some out, lose some. I know the Chargers lost today, but I think there's going to be a real dogfight this year for the AFC West between those two. And you could probably throw Denver in there too. I think that's what's real, but I also think Kansas City, they make the playoffs. I don't care what 1 to 7 seed they are. They're going to be super dangerous regardless of when and where they play.
Absolutely. The last time Mahomes threw for 4 touchdowns was October 2023. So it has been pretty much 2 years since he's thrown for 4 touchdowns in a game.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I think the Chiefs are just always going to be there. You're going to have to take it from them, no matter what team is in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes has been to the AFC Championship game every year he has started. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you literally you got to take it from them. And and Buffalo's out to a 4-0 start. I still feel
kind of a quiet start. Kind of a quiet 4-0 start. If you could have a quiet 4-0 start, that's Buffalo.
Yeah, I feel like besides the fact that they played Baltimore in week 1, I feel like playing the Jets, Dolphins, and Saints really isn't saying much about winning those games.
What's the combined record of all those 4 teams? Gosh, one.
Shit. Hold on. We know the Jets oh my God.
I know.
1-12.
Yeah. Yep. Not to take away anything from Buffalo, because they're good, but I think maybe that's why it's been quiet, because their opponents are 1-12 so far.
And they play the Patriots next week, and then the Falcons, and then the Panthers. Okay, so
are they going undefeated? No, I'm kidding. They play Philly end of the year, but
so Buffalo obviously beat the Ravens, but they really haven't played a quality team yet, because you can't say the Ravens are a really good team at this point. So Buffalo's got some things to kind of do, but there is going to be a matchup with KC in week, what would that be, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, week 9, right? So that's going to be a big matchup with them. And I think at that point, you'll kind of know who is the top of the AFC during that matchup there.
Yeah. I imagine they'll be 7-0, 8-0 or whatever, Buffalo, probably going into that game. And so that will be a good one.
Yep. All right. So to get on to the next segment, I see my guy, Cam Miller. Fly, Eagles, fly. Well, they did stay undefeated. But Eric, we had a guy named, I don't know, what's his name? AJ Brown? Did he kind of send out a little tweet today that said, if you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene, shrug your shoulders, and be on your way. And this is after winning the game. Eric,
undefeated.
He knows what he's doing. And I don't want to hear tomorrow that, oh, no, I was just quoting one of my famous books I read on the sideline. Because, I haven't seen him read no books on the sideline since that one time.
Remember, I was about to bring a book around here. I was about to bring it out.
So, Eric, what do you make about A.J. Brown right now?
Well, he's going to be a topic of conversation a couple times today. Hint, hint. Maybe later in the show. But yeah, it's a tough season for him. And so while we know it's about winning, I'm sure he cares about that. But when you're in particular at the receiver position and kind of have like the personality that, he's like one of those receiver, divas with lack of a better word. And so they want the ball. They want to put numbers up and win versus like winning and being the best run blocker out there. And so I think we know what he's talking about. But as long as Philly's continuing to win, I don't know. It's going to be hard for him to force the issue. And so, but I think at some point they are going to need him to have some big games, or for us fantasy owners, we pray to God that's the case. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting quote after going 4-0. But I mean, you saw his stat line today. Oh, I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
We can get into that in a future segment there.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yep.
But my thing is, we've seen this before. Obviously, him and Jalen Hurts have been having some sort of issue. Sometimes they'll have a game where they have a great game together, and then a lot of times he goes pedestrian for a couple games, right? So being undefeated and then having a player do this is always a worry, because you want it to be about the team and not just one individual. And A.J. Brown is pretty much making it about himself. So I think, yes, can they squash this and can they move on next week and get to a place where they're still winning games and he gets the ball? Yes. But what's this going to look like moving forward? It continues to happen. And at some point, the season gets very long. And if this continues to be a problem, then you get to a point where, like, do we bench him? Do we put him on one of those lists, or do we trade him? All that type of stuff. Because I don't think that Philly really wants to play that game right now, especially when they're winning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking of winning. So I'm looking. So last year, including the playoffs, they won 16 out of 17 games. And one of them included, a game at Washington. Yeah, week 16, they lost. So 16 of 17, including the playoffs. And then they won their first 4, right? This year. So what is that? 20 of 21 that they've won. So, I mean, that. I don't think that's like talked about a lot enough, because that's a pretty remarkable run. You know how hard it is to win in the NFL. I mean, ask a lot of teams, right? Yep. And to win 20 of 21, I don't care how it's happening this year so far. And so that's why it's tough for a guy like A.J. Brown, because you don't really have a lot of weight to kind of use or leverage, I guess I could say, because they're freaking winning games. And he's had some big games in there, of course, but he's had some real quiet ones as well. And so, I'm kind of interested to see where this all goes. Because, like, if he's like, hey, if you're not going to need me, then, deal me or something like that, it'll be, crazy to see. But yeah, man, they've been winning at a pretty ridiculous pace.
Yeah, they are obviously showing who they are. One of the best teams in the NFL, definitely in the NFC. But I do think there are some teams that will be there, right? Like the Rams showed today. They beat the undefeated Colts team. They have an explosive offense. I think for Philly, yes, they are winning games. And yes, they've won 20 out of 21. I know they won the Super Bowl, but I don't trust them as much with their offense that they can fully. I know they find a way to win a game every time, but when it gets later into the season and you got a team like the Rams, or you got teams that have really elite defenses too as well, they might get into trouble if they need to pass the ball. Yes, we saw last week that if Jalen needed to pass the ball, he got the ball in the second half. But it almost reminds me of the season when they lost both coordinators, and they still started out 10-1 that season. Remember? I think they were 10-1 or 11-1.
Something like that. Yeah,
but they were like struggling to win games. There's all that chatter where you got people drama, fighting, yada, yada, yada. And I feel like this is similar because last week there was a flip the switch where I believe like Jalen, they had this little like player meeting at halftime and they decided to get going with their offense, right? So I think there's something there. There's some sort of drama. And could this be just not having the coordinators that they had for the Super Bowl? Possibly, right? And I think that will ultimately divide the team a little bit. So they have to nip it in the butt right now, or else it's going to fester and get even worse.
Yeah, they kind of remind me a little bit too of like the Chiefs last year. So they've won it's been all one possession games. The last 2 weeks have been, I guess you can say, weren't really like positioned to be one score games. They were down big last week. They were up big this week. Yeah. And so it was kind of the opposite. They obviously won last week and they hung on this week. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can keep it up. They obviously have the championship DNA. They're going to win some games, but it is definitely tough to play in all one possession games because there's always going to be a few bounces that don't go your way. And so, not to say that they have to go undefeated or anything like that, but they're actually going through. I mean, they got a semi-tough stretch coming up. Denver. They got Giants a couple times. At Minnesota is always tough. At Green Bay, Detroit. So they'll be battle tested coming up here, and we'll see kind of how they do after the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting next weeks. They obviously still look like to be one of the top teams in the NFL. Yeah,
not a bad spot to be in, obviously.
For sure. All right, so let's get to some of the somber news in the NFL, unfortunately, and that was with two marquee players. We had Malik Nabers go down with a non-contact knee injury, it looks like it is an ACL, kind of for confirmation from Adam Schefter. They are going to do MRI tomorrow, but to be honest, that's just to ultimately confirm the injury. By now, they know that it's an ACL injury based on some of the testing that they did. But it's just unfortunate, right? You had Jackson Dart starting for the first time today, got all this momentum. You even win the game against the Chargers, who were undefeated, and Malik Nabers goes down. And so the first thing you kind of think about is you've had some big injuries at MetLife Stadium, right? What's their field, Eric? What's their surface?
I know it's that obviously some kind of turf or that I don't even know what it's called, but
it's a turf field, right? The problem is
imitation grass kind of.
Yeah, it's like this. They call it like it's like this natural but fake kind of grass, right? So it's a field turf, but the problem is you know that it's caused kind of these injuries from the past, right? We think about Aaron Rodgers when he went down.
Field turf court.
Right? So it's at this point in the NFL, and you saw, I don't know if you saw Odell Beckham's tweet, but he's like, look, we know we want player health and safety. Why can't we just play on grass fields completely? And it's not that all turf fields is to blame completely. However, there is more chance that cleats get stuck, or more chance that when you're pivoting, something doesn't rotate as much, which causes these type of injuries, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on turf fields versus grass, or just this whole dilemma?
I mean, I'm assuming they probably do it because it's just like easier just to maintain. It looks nice. You don't gotta obviously, when it's grass, it's actual grass. It's a different type of issue. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously they're gonna probably look at data, and there has been some pretty big injuries there, and so for a league that makes all the rule changes, right, apparently to satisfy concussions and changing the kickoffs and changing the overtime rules, making it 10 minutes, as we alluded to earlier, from 15. And so you would just think that would be another thing that would be kind of talked about for player safety, especially if, somebody like yourself, you're saying that it's not necessarily all its fault, but there have been some pretty catastrophic injuries there and others stadiums and that have used that same exact turf. And so, yeah, it's something that the league probably does have to look at, and I'm sure they do often. But every time it happens again, and you're one of your stars goes out, that's the way they're going to take it serious, is if more and more stars go out.
Yeah. So it's interesting. They switched to this like transitional period of a turf. It's a hybrid system mixed with natural gas and artificial. But for the 2026 World Cup, they are switching to natural grass, but they just haven't done it yet. So you're going to switch for soccer, but you didn't switch for your NFL teams. And this has been a topic for a while. So it's kind of interesting that they have this, whatever you want to call hybrid, but if it's hybrid, it's more turf than it is natural grass, right? So at this point, you are switching for FIFA, and you're switching because they have their rules that they have to play on natural, or they want to play on natural grass, I'm assuming, with all the World Cup games. And you let a player like this happen to a player like this when you could have just got natural grass to begin with. I don't know. I think it's just bogus, and I think most teams should be on grass fields. Not that it's going to prevent ACLs completely or these type of injuries completely. However, I think we've had enough evidence that artificial turf is doing more damage than it is good.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It's true to change it for the World Cup. We understand that, and there's economics, and all these stadiums and cities make bids, and the way they get selected is by appeasing FIFA. And so I get all that, but yeah, it's something to kind of look at going forward in the future years.
Most definitely. All right. So let's get to what we talked about before. Lamar Jackson left today's game with a hamstring injury. Right. We don't know the severity yet. We don't know if it is actually a strain or if he kind of just pulled the muscle and it was precautionary because they were losing by a lot of points. Now, the major thing is more than likely he'll have an MRI tomorrow, or he has already had it today to determine the severity. Now, if it is a strain, this is super concerning because what does Lamar do well? He runs. Right? He's not a pocket passer. He obviously uses the hybrid game of running and passing and sets up his pass with his run. So even if it is a low grade strain, like a grade 1, which is usually comes with like a 1 to 2 week, more of a 2 week healing time frame, you're going to err on the side of caution because it can be easily aggravated by a player like Lamar, because he's always running all over the place. So it's not something that he could just play through in the pocket as much as a normal, say, pocket passer would. And when you think about like a grade 2, that's more of a partial tear, right? So you're looking at probably 4 to 6 weeks in the time frame if it was a grade 2. I think from reports, they haven't said a lot, but I did hear some reports that possibly could he have gone in if it was like the game was still in balance, or he could have stayed in. Maybe, but I would still err on the side of caution that even if it's a grade 1, they got 2 games before they have a bye week. More than likely, I don't see Lamar playing the next 2 games because they have that bye week following that 3rd one. So if they can somehow get a win in the next week's game with Cooper Rush, and then you kind of 2-3 playing Miami, and then you have a bye after that. I think that's a possibility of maybe resting Lamar for at least 3 weeks in the season.
Yeah, it's tough injury. I mean, it was a little hard to tell because they were down by, I guess, quite a bit, and so at this point, we don't know if it was mainly the score that dictated him being out, or what it was the injury, or a little bit of both. And so, yeah, you've basically said it. For Lamar, what his weapon are his legs. Of course, he throws a nice ball too, but it's really his legs, and the threat of him running it at any time and moving around is Lamar Jackson. So they are 1-3. So hopefully they don't, rush a decision based on that. He seems to kind of play through things. I mean, I know he's had a year where he was out, but he is kind of a tough customer. And so I guess we'll have to see kind of throughout the week if he's going to be practicing and what the diagnosis is later in the week. But as we all know, Ravens need him, but they need him more so in week 6, 7, 8, and 9 and on versus, that type of competition versus kind of what they have coming up here. And so hopefully they make the right decision, and, hopefully he misses at max 2 games, which would bring him back, of course, after the bye week.
Yeah. And even if it's not a strain and he kind of just pulled it, it's likely with these type of injuries, with the type of player he has, they're going to use more caution, even if it's just like the very small, minimal, not even grade 1, but just right before that. Likely they give him a little bit of time to kind of rest that, so they don't make something worse, right? You don't turn anything to like a full tear or a partial tear. So likely he'll get some time. We'll know more about it and kind of update everybody after we find out tomorrow.
Let's see what happens for him.
Yep. All right. So we got into our next segment, which is our fantasy studs and duds. Eric, I'm gonna let you get started with this one. Who are your fantasy studs for week 4?
All right. So gonna go with 3 different guys here. I'm gonna kind of pull up some stats real quick. So the first that I gotta go with, and this guy is gotta give him some credit. He was drafted high a few seasons back by the Chargers. He was really been seen as a bust, through his first couple seasons in the NFL. I'm going with Quentin Johnston. He's actually had a pretty solid season thus far, which is kind of why I chose him. He had a nice game, kind of getting those exact stats. Bear with me. He played obviously the Giants. Jeez, where are they at? All right, so he had 8 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. And so it's kind of been what he's been doing all season. He's catching that deep ball from Phillip Rivers, super explosive, super fast. So he's been a pleasant surprise, and I got him as one of my studs. My other stud, who I had him as a stud kind of going into the season, and that is Josh Jacobs. So he's having another really solid season. We know that Green Bay, we talked a lot about it earlier, 40-40, a lot of passing. But at the end of the day, him, 22 carries, 86 yards, 2 big touchdowns. Anytime, he can get in the end zone, especially a couple times, that is a big, big fantasy production there. And then lastly, I am going with, I don't know if it's somebody that we've even mentioned the past few weeks. And man, he has just been balling out. Puka Nacua. Man, that guy is, if you kind of look at PPR league, he's really, I think he's ranked number 1 in terms of wideouts. Just nothing but numbers. There's a lot of times where he catches a lot of balls, gets a lot of yards, but he doesn't get in the end zone. And so it was a pleasant surprise, I'm sure, for fantasy owners today to see him get in the end zone. So those are my 3 fantasy studs this week.
Yeah, those are some great picks. I know we talked about Quentin Johnson, and the fact how he's been coming on, and that was last week, and then again he's doing it again this week, and to me it reminds me of that Devontae Adams, right, where he's trying to figure it out, struggled early in his first couple of years in his league, and then now has kind of turned it around. So awesome to see there. All right, for me, my fantasy studs are all running backs. We're going to go with a guy that we talked about last week as a fantasy dud, and that is Ashton Jeanty. Okay. He went wild today, and it was one of those games where like you thought he might have a chance to really take the lead, show what he's, why he was drafted so high, and he did just that, right? He scored 33.8 fantasy points. He had 3 TDs, he had 138 yards, and he had 2 receptions for 17 yards. And we talked about on the season, he had 5 receptions for 3 yards. And there you go. He had a hell of a game. He showed why he was a top 5 pick, obviously, or was he 6th pick? But just obviously top pick in this league and the first running back off the board. So hats off to Ashton Jeanty. Hell of a game there. Now, my other running backs are people that are more than likely on the waiver wire in your league. And that would be 1, Woody Marks, guy out of SC, rookie out of SC. And he had 17 carries for 69 yards and TD. But more importantly, he had 4 receptions for 50 yards and a TD for the Houston Texans. And they have been struggling so much with the run game. So seeing somebody like this come out and seeing somebody actually prove that they can have a resemblance of a running game, especially without Joe Mixon, and Nick Chubb seems to just not be that guy anymore after the major injury that he had. So Woody Marks came out there, handled his business, and props to him. And the other guy is Kenneth Gainwell, right? So you knew Jaylen Warren was going to play for Pittsburgh, but he went out and just dominated the early morning game at 6:30. He had, let me get this right. What do you have? 19 carries for 99 yards and 2 TDs, and also followed that up with 6 receptions for 35 yards. So if these guys are on your waiver wire, obviously pick them up. They are going to be one of those people that would be top tier kind of grabs there. And I think kind of moving forward, you know what you're getting out of Gainwell, and you probably know what you're getting out of Marks. So I think they're going to be 2 good picks there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one that stands out, Ashton Jeanty, there was, not only did we rip him last week, but I felt there was like a week of ripping him, right? Like you had a lot of guys like come out and say like, you could just tell he's not going to be good, and he's just not getting it done. So props to the young fella for just showing out. And so, yeah, I mean, guys like, Kenneth Gainwell, Gainwell was on the Eagles for quite some time, right? It's that Kenneth Gainwell. So yeah, it's good to kind of see somebody like that who's been a little bit of a, he's a vet. And so he's taking advantage of the opportunity ahead of him. And so, yeah, those are guys that you obviously can't imagine, plugging them in before they have an outing like that. But just, you always want to be on the lookout for guys like that are kind of like that plug and play. Because there's always a good chance they can put up good numbers.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Eric. So let's get into actually, before that, I see Cam Miller put his top 3: James Cook, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. Can't go wrong with those guys. Those are some of the studs in the NFL there. So those are some good fantasy studs. But let's get into our fantasy duds. And Eric, do you want me to start with this one? Yep.
Yeah. How about you kick us off, and then I'll give you mine.
All right. So my first one is an unfortunate one because I like this guy a lot. But Derrick Henry, for the 3rd straight game, he has failed to post double-digit numbers, right? So he finished with 7.8 fantasy points today. And moving forward, if they don't have Lamar, that's going to be an issue for Derrick Henry because I'm just telling you, no disrespect to Cooper Rush, but you know who they're going to be trying to guard in the next game. They're going to be stacking the box with 8 for Derrick Henry, right? So I think he's going to have a little bit more difficulty without Lamar if Lamar was not playing. So that's why I got him in the fantasy duds today, because I just think it's going to be difficult for him kind of moving forward if Lamar is not there. My second guy, man, I honestly don't really know what to make out of this guy right now, because I felt like he was going to be, probably a top 10 receiver this year. And that is Ladd McConkey on the Chargers. And I know we've been talking about Cute Quinn, right? He obviously has had a great year. But 1 reception for 11 yards. 1 reception for 11 yards. I mean, to me, I don't want to throw Hunter Renfrow out there, but this has got to remind you of when he had that little season, and you're like, "Oh, Hunter's a bad man." You had people talking about him. Hunter, this amazing route runner, he could do anything, he could do everything. That's the same thing you felt about Ladd, and I just need to see something. I know they got plenty of receivers there. They have great receivers there now that they have Kenneth Allen back, and obviously Johnson's doing stuff. I just need to see more, especially if you were supposed to be the main guy. So for fantasy purposes, I think he needs to step up. And the last guy I'll kind of go with is Caleb Williams, primarily because he was touted as having not a surefire week, but after coming off a big game last week, after coming off pretty good games, the first 2 games as well, as you got to put this guy in your lineup. This is a QB1. You got to get him going. And he kind of, he did win the game, so that's all that really matters. But he wasn't where you wanted him to be. I mean, he threw for 212 and a score. But that's it. And he also had an interception. So he really is more pedestrian than he was, obviously, a fantasy stud this week. So I got Caleb in my fantasy dud this week.
Yeah, those are definitely some guys that came to my mind too. Want to say week 1, we kind of had, either one of us had Derrick Henry as a stud, rightfully so, because we kind of talked about like how at least the last few years, we kind of doubt drafting him, and then you don't draft him, and all of a sudden he goes off. So he is someone that when he goes three straight weeks of single-digit fantasy points, that's really unlike him. I know he had some fumbles there too for a while, the first few games. That's a little bit uncharacteristic, so something to watch out there. And yeah, McConkey was just somebody that you just figured he was just going to have an outstanding season. And so, yeah, there is guys there. And so he's got to spread that ball around. So I kind of would look forward to him having hopefully a kind of bounce back, last 3 quarters of the year, but definitely a tough start for all those guys. I'm going to just quickly jump into it, because I got one that we've already talked about him earlier today. I just couldn't get. I have my fantasy team up right now. And AJ Brown, he was my second pick in the second round. And so just going to give you his fantasy production this first 4 games. First game, 1.8. Second game, 7.7. Third game, 22.9. He's back, right? 2 catches for 9 yards today, 2.7. This is a PPR league. He's lucky. It's lucky he's a PPR league. Let's just say that. Or else he'd have less than a point. We talked a lot about it earlier, so I won't get too much into it, but he's almost getting to that point where it's like, it's hard to not play him because he could explode, I guess. But that is just ugly for someone that should be kind of like a top-notch receiver. Yeah, I don't know what to say. They got Denver coming up next, which is, got a tough secondary. So I don't know if that's going to really turn around, but that's just ugly. So I had to start off with that. doesn't get much worse. But I'm going to go with someone who I don't know if it's a big concern because he's had a solid year. I'm going to go David Montgomery. And so that's one of the downsides of when you have like a 2-back system and you feel like you have to play him, right? Because he does produce and he's been pretty good the first couple or few games, I should say. But I think every once in a while you're going to have a game like this, 9 carries, 12 yards, and that's really, really tough to have in your lineup. It's going to be impossible for those two to just have tremendous games, game after game. And obviously, I mean, injuries aside, knock on wood, Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of like that lead back who's going to get a little bit more of the bulk. So I have him as my one of my duds. And then lastly, I hate to do him like this because he's just such like on a bad team, but I'm going to just go kind of Alvin Kamara. Look, he's been doing this for a long time and I wouldn't expect him just to have just tremendous numbers. But it's just kind of been pretty pedestrian, 15 carries, 70 yards, did get a few grabs, but no touchdowns. Saints are just bad. Doesn't always necessarily mean that you can't have like a productive player on a bad team because sometimes that happens, but it's just concerning because they're just really, really bad. They hung in there with Buffalo for the most part today, but I think in most cases are going to be down a lot of points where he may not really factor in. So that is my final dud of the week.
Eric, do you remember in fantasy when there's no PPR and you wouldn't get a point unless they reached 10 yards?
Yep. Yeah, I recall there's no decimals.
There's no decimals. AJ Brown would have got 0, essentially. Yeah, that's at the top of the duds right there, pretty much. He'd have 2 games at 0. 2 of the 4 would be 0. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm saying. Like the people are kind of skews it because it didn't matter. He barely scored any points, but he would have just had 2 0-point games
and a 2. Two zeros and a 2.
Yeah. So he's off to a pretty rough start, and obviously is frustrated, as you can see his tweet. But that sums up our fantasy duds there. Eric, you got anything else to say about this week 4?
Let's see. You got Miami and the Jets tomorrow. Winless teams. Could be ugly. But
they can flex that. They can flex that for anything.
I know. Well, I guess they got the 2 games, and they got the Bengals and Sun. Forgot who, Denver, but just a weird Sunday night game in terms of just like the final result to end things. But it's crazy that we're already practically through 4 weeks, almost a quarter of the season. You know how it is. The NFL season just flies by. But we're on and running. Yep.
All right, and tomorrow, going back to basketball.
Oh yes,
it is Lakers Media Day.
Yep.
So get ready, basketball fans. We're going to hear a lot about LeBron. We're going to hear a lot about Luka, and we're going to get into a show at some point, either Monday or Tuesday, about everything that happened at Lakers Media Day. But for this week, obviously the football show is a big week 4. Packers tying with the Cowboys. A lot of things happening. Some injuries, but thank you all for listening. We will be back later in the week to talk about some basketball and then obviously get back to some football as well. But for now, the Hoops Rehab team is out. Peace out, guys.
Peace out, everyone.